Hello, everybody, and today for Star Wars Day, happy Star Wars Day, I'm reviewing Star Wars Attack of the Clones, the second in the Star Wars prequels saga. So, as you know, every Star Wars Day I review one of the Star Wars movies, and this time we are at Attack of the Clones. And honestly, it's not my favorite of the Star Wars prequels. I think this is easily the weakest of them. But there are still a lot of things I do enjoy about this movie and have a lot of respect for, so let's get into it. So this is where Anakin Skywalker, played by Hayden Christensen, and I had the fortunate of meeting him at Comic-Con. He was super nice, easy to talk to for just a few seconds, but we got our photo, and it looked amazing, a memory that I'll always cherish. So, this is where Anakin is assigned to protect Padme after she gets assassination attempts on her life, while Obi-Wan tries to investigate who is behind this. So this movie was an interesting one for sure. It has a lot of stuff that builds towards the great stuff of the prequels, like the Clone Wars, Count Dooku, Anakin, Obi-Wan, the stuff that leads to Anakin's downfall. There's just so much to talk about for this movie. There is a lot of issues I do have, like I said, but the main thing that does happen in this movie is Anakin is trying to get towards Padme when he is assigned to protect her after she tries to go to the Coruscant safely, but her Naboo starfire gets destroyed, and her friend Corey dies. And always remember that character for her name being Corey, and she just dies in Padme's arms, which was tragic. But the way Padme is gonna get assassinated in this movie, that they're trying to do it, is really complicated. And I guess people nitpick about the way it looks, the way they did it. It's basically where Sidious contacts Count Dooku to kill Padme, but he hires Jango Fett to do it, but then he hires another bounty hunter named Zam Wesell, and she herself uses worms to take out Padme, which are pretty gross looking, but mainly Anakin and Obi-Wan are debating the whole Palpatine thing, being a good guy or not, and Obi-Wan's trying to tell him to be trusty of him, not be trusty of him. But of course, it gets interrupted once they do hear the worms, and even R2's watching, which I thought was wild. But Obi-Wan manages to jump out the window and hop onto the probe droid, with Anakin going after the land speeders. I always liked those little Coruscant land speeders, but the best part of this, one of the underrated parts about this movie, is that we see the world of Coruscant, which I really liked. We were supposed to get a Star Wars Underworld show, which explored that concept of the background of the Coruscant, but it got canceled because of budget. But this is like a sort of glimpse at it. But I actually do like the speeder chase against Zam Wesell, where Anakin jumps off the thing and Obi-Wan's like, I hate it when he does that. But Anakin does lose his lightsaber when he tries to catch her, but instead they crash land on near the undercity of Coruscant, and they manage to go into a bar, a cantina on Coruscant, and even Obi-Wan gives Anakin his lightsaber back, saying, this weapon is your life. But of course, probably my favorite scene in this whole movie is where a man tries to give death sticks to Obi-Wan, and of course he says, no, you don't want to sell me death sticks, and tells him he wants to rethink his life. I always love that scene, just the Force mind trick, showing how badass Obi-Wan is. But our two main Jedi try to find Zam Wesell, who is hiding in plain sight on this world. I forgot to also mention, we do get a cameo of Ahmed Best and Anthony Daniels hiding in the background on Coruscant, which I thought was cool. It's nice to see them do another role besides Jar Jar and C-3PO, which we see less of. Less Jar Jar, the better. But of course, our Jedi do find Zam, and Obi-Wan manages to slice her blaster away, and they try to investigate her, but she gets shot by a dart. And we see her true form, which is she's revealed to be a shapeshifter species, which I thought was interesting. But once Anakin is assigned by the council to protect Padme, this is where the movie kind of slows down for me. As the one thing I didn't really like about Attack of the Clones is that the romance just feels so outdated and cheesy to watch. But it makes sense since we have to learn how Anakin fell in love and eventually helped give birth to Luke and Leia. And we see that love story play out with Hayden and Natalie Portman. But Obi-Wan, of course, doesn't trust Anakin to go on the assignment, but he goes along with it anyway. So Obi-Wan decides to investigate who's behind this assassination attempt. And we actually see a little bit of more of the archives of Coruscant, the Jedi Temple. We see Jocasta Nu, the old lady who helps Obi-Wan try to find the planet of the saber dart, but it's mainly that he's trying to find the planet Kamino. But he at first goes to Dexter Jester, who is the diner owner of Coruscant. And I actually really liked their friendship in this movie. I'd love to see more of that for what led to Obi-Wan and Dexter Jester to meet. And he actually manages to find out that the saber dart is from Kamino, and that's where Obi-Wan goes to Jocasta Nu about it. He goes to Yoda about it, but they can't really find anything as Kamino has been deleted. Later in Tales of the Jedi, it'd be revealed that young Count Dooku deleted it, but that's where it leads Obi-Wan to go on the journey to hopefully find the coordinates for Kamino, while Anakin and Padme go to Naboo, where she wants to go on her vacation. She ends up seeing her family. Those scenes got deleted for some reason, but we see more of the Naboo people who are discussing the future of their conflicts with the Separatists. But we get some cringy scenes where Anakin's like, "Oh, hey, my lady, I'm here to protect you." And then we hear scenes like, "Oh, Anakin doesn't like sand," which is easily the best line of this movie. That I don't like sand. It's coarse, rough, and irritating, and it gets everywhere. I love that scene. It's so funny. It's meant to be just a scene of romance between Hayden and Natalie. But the one thing that I can probably criticize George Lucas for is that, I don't know, he's not really the best when it comes to directing actors. He's great at story, but when he comes to directing actors, yeah, you can tell it's not really the best. But as time goes on, I kind of just forget about that stuff. But mainly what's going on with this movie is Anakin and Padme are just teasing each other. They're having picnics together. They tackle each other on the grass, just having a good time. While Obi-Wan does go to Kamino, and it's, of course, a rainy planet. He goes to the planet, and this is where we do meet the Kaminoans, who are creating the clones, who were ordered by the Jedi Sifo-Dyas. And yeah, they don't really explore Sifo-Dyas in this movie, the concept of him. But later in the Clone Wars, they're able to explore more what led to his death and how he was basically tricked into creating the clone army after seeing a vision. But this is apparently, it was all up to Count Dooku, as he wanted to create the clone army for Sidious, just so they can have an army to kill the Jedi. And once we do see the clones, they're all Tamora Morrison. They're all a bunch of CGI clones having a good time at Kamino. But this is where we do get the introduction of Jango Fett and Boba Fett. A much younger one, played by Daniel Logan, who is still a major part of the Star Wars family, as he would go on to voice Boba in the Clone Wars. But As for Tomoa Morrison, I do like Jango Fett. I would have loved to see him more, but I did read the Open Seasons comic of Jango Fett, which is a really good run, which explains how Jango was chosen to be the main guy to create the clone army. His armor just looks awesome. The blue, the gray, the purple sleeves, it works. But when Obi-Wan does confront him, he tries to ask him about if he's behind the thing going on with Padme. But of course he denies it, saying he's just a simple man making his way around the galaxy. But once Obi-Wan discovers the truth behind him, I forget how, I'm so sorry, he tries to confront Jango Fett, and he pulls out the lightsaber. This is probably one of my favorite action sequences of the movie, where Obi-Wan fights Jango Fett on the platform, and I even remember the Lego level of it, where he tries to get away from Obi-Wan, where Jango is just using his jetpack, his missiles, his wires to try to throw Obi-Wan off the platform. But of course, Obi-Wan's able to outwit it. But unfortunately, Jango does get away, and he bumps his head just like the stormtrooper. And that's where we do see the Slave One the first time get it basically, the hyperdrive goes in and it goes away, but Obi-Wan manages to throw a tracker on it. But as for young Boba Fett, I honestly was surprised we were going to see him in this movie, because originally in the expanded universe, Boba Fett was completely different. He wasn't a clone, but after some changes by George Lucas, they were able to incorporate him in this movie. Daniel Logan he did his job for this movie for such a young age, as I guess George Lucas wanted to pick younger actors to be part of Star Wars, which is nothing wrong with that. But during all this, Anakin is still going on his romance with Padme until he has a nightmare. And he literally says Jedi don't have nightmares, but he does. Where he dreams of his mother dying, and so he decides to go visit Tatooine with Padme, but he still has to maintain his duty, where he does go to Tatooine, and we see the return of Watto. And I'm surprised Watto is still the same slimy, greedy dude that he is. He claims that he sold Shmi when Anakin found him, and he still tries to sell something to Anakin, and he's just like, nope. But basically, Anakin's able to find some connections to his mother, where it's revealed that's where we meet the Lars family. We see a much younger Uncle Owen, Aunt Beru, and even Khalif Lars, who is who married Shmi. But unfortunately, she was kidnapped by Tusken Raiders, and Anakin decides to go out and look, but they try to convince him not to do it because they feel Shmi is probably dead. But during all this, Obi-Wan manages to track Jango Fett, and that's where we do get a space chase where it's kind of like Empire, where Han Solo's trying to escape the Empire through the asteroid field. This is Obi-Wan's time to go after Jango Fett in the asteroid field, and we even see some scenes where the Slave One uses like these turbo beams that make a loud sound. But he almost gets Obi-Wan, but of course he manages to hide. I even like the line where he says, "This is why I hate flying." But I forgot to also mention we get R4. So R4 is basically the red version of R2-D2, but unfortunately, he gets his head chopped off the next movie, but he was definitely a great help for Obi-Wan. But they managed to hide on the asteroid field for a while, until they track Jango to the planet Geonosis. But this is where we flash forward to Anakin manages to track Shmi to a Tusken Raider camp with the help of some Jawas, where Anakin does go to the camp of the Tusken Raiders, and he actually manages to find Shmi. And this is probably the most tragic part of the movie, where Shmi is beaten to death by these Tusken Raiders, and Anakin is devastated to find her in this state. But they have a moment of connection where she tells Anakin that she's proud of him for what he has become, the Jedi Knight that he wanted to be. And I'm so glad Shmi got to recognize Anakin, but unfortunately, she dies in his arms, and this is where we see the darkness of Anakin unleash, the slow glimpse of Darth Vader, where he pulls out his lightsaber and just slaughters all the Tusken Raiders. But later, when he comes back, he buries Shmi. He's devastated. He said he wished he was stronger, but this is where he confesses to Padme that he murdered all the Tusken Raiders, and he did not really... He sort of regrets it, but he just did it because he was so angry. But Padme even manages to tell him that he is human after all. I'm surprised Padme is somewhat cool with this. This is the one criticism people had with this movie, and yeah, I do agree. But honestly, Padme probably just wanted to show her love to Anakin, but it's just weird that she seemed okay with it until Revenge of the Sith. But that's a different story. But Obi-Wan manages to find Jango Fett's ship on Geonosis. This is where we do get our first glimpse of Count Dooku, where he is leading the Separatist movement, and he has a bunch of just random Separatist people that would become staple villains of the Clone Wars. But they're basically greedy pawns of Count Dooku, and they manage to talk about what their plans are. But Obi-Wan gets captured on Geonosis, and this is probably one of my favorite scenes, where Count Dooku manages to tell Obi-Wan that there was many reasons why he left the Jedi Order, and he would think Qui-Gon would also join his movement. But Obi-Wan's denial of the whole thing, until Count Dooku manages to tell Obi-Wan about Darth Sidious. And this is where our first glimpse at Obi-Wan knowing about the Sith. But he's still in denial about it. But I forgot to also mention the amazing, legendary Christopher Lee plays Count Dooku. So Christopher Lee was easily the highlight of this movie. I think he's definitely a legendary actor. Not just for Lord of the Rings, but definitely for Star Wars for sure. But I think Lord of the Rings was still coming out when this movie came out. But the way Count Dooku speaks in this, I definitely wanted to learn more about his character for sure. But we get more of that in the Clone Wars for sure, and Tales of the Jedi. I feel like the Tales of the Jedi definitely helps me understand Dooku, and he's definitely different from most Sith Lords, where Darth Maul is all about revenge, Sidious is all about power. Dooku is actually believes what he's doing is right, but the way he does it is totally wrong, as he commits so many war crimes throughout the Clone Wars. He does a lot of bad things for sure, but Dooku always fascinated me as a character for sure. But my favorite Sith Lord is easily Darth Vader, but Dooku's definitely the more underrated ones for sure. But once Anakin gets the alert about Obi-Wan's capture, Mace Windu tells Anakin to not go after Obi-Wan, but Padme decides to do it anyway. And forgot to also mention we get C-3PO in this movie, who is now owned by Uncle Owen. So now I'm wondering, why doesn't Owen remember 3PO? Probably because he has a bunch of droids working on his farm. So it's probably a dime a dozen to his. That's the way I explain it. But 3PO manages to team up with R2. And this is our first time we see these two really get to shine in the prequels, where they've only met once in the Phantom Menace, but of course, this is where we get a bunch of silly scenes once they do go to the Geonosis droid factory, where it's revealed that they're building the battle droids. But Padme manages to sneak in there. Once they do arrive with Anakin, she falls, and Anakin manages to pull out his lightsaber, and yeah, he's twirling around it a lot in this scene until he almost gets crushed to death by all the machines. But with the help of R2, who manages to pull out his rocket boosters, which I always loved. R2's rocket boosters look so badass. But he manages to save Padme and Anakin until they get captured by Jango Fett, who makes them surrender. We see a bunch of droids, and during all this, 3PO gets pushed off by R2, and yeah, 3PO accidentally gets his head chopped off, where he becomes a battle droid, and he's just fascinated by all the machinery of the battle droids. But of course, this is where our characters do get sent to the Geonosian arena pit, where we see Anakin, Padme, Obi-Wan trapped on the Colosseum. I don't know why LEGO will never do this for a set. Where did we get the Colosseum of Geonosis? It'd probably be a little large, but this is where we see like a bunch of creatures come out, where we see like this dinosaur-looking thing, this giant crab-looking snake thing, and just so many creatures, where they're going to eat our free characters until Obi-Wan's like, Padme seems to be on top of things, where Padme manages to free herself, and she manages to find a way to get on top of this giant cat-looking thing that actually scratches her, and we get a sort of battle-damaged-looking Padme. But Anakin and Obi-Wan managed to escape, and they actually try to survive without their lightsabers, and Anakin also got his lightsaber destroyed, and he's just like, oh, Obi-Wan's gonna kill me. But it isn't until Mace Windu pulls out into the arena, and we see Samuel Jackson pull out that purple lightsaber. So Samuel Jackson wanted to have Spotlight. We all know this story, where Samuel Jackson wanted to have Spotlight in the arena, but of course Lucas didn't really want to do the purple lightsaber until he changed his mind. And this is where we get our first glimpse of the purple lightsaber in live action Star Wars. It looks super awesome. It suits Samuel Jackson really well. He pulls out the lightsaber, and he manages to jump into the arena with a bunch of other Jedi who decide to tag along. This is probably my favorite aspect of the movie, where we see all the Jedi come out of nowhere. We see our favorite background Jedi who would get characterization in the Clone Wars. Even the infamous Coleman Trevor, the dinosaur-looking Jedi, who gets shot down by Jango Fett, and yeah, he dies. Crazy. But our characters have their lightsabers. Even Anakin has a green lightsaber, just like Luke Skywalker. And our characters manage to fight all the battle droids that come into the arena. Even C-3PO, who gets knocked down by Kit Fisto. One of my favorite background Jedi. I love Kit Fisto. I can go on all day about him. But R2 manages to find 3PO and reattach his head while all these Jedi are trying to fight their way into the arena. Even Jango Fett jumps into the arena until he gets his head chopped off by Mace Windu. So it devastates Boba, which leads to the conflicts in the Clone Wars, where Boba tries to take out Mace Windu, and even Dooku seems a little appalled by it, until the last remaining Jedi are all surrounded. And I bet all these background actors who got to be this Jedi, they were all very glad to be a part of it. But our characters are surrounded by battle droids, but they refuse to surrender until Master Yoda, which I forgot to mention. Yoda has a hover chair in this movie, where he uses the clone troopers to take out the droids. And yeah, I love the clone troopers. Even though they're all a bunch of CGI looking dudes, they still look badass. They save our fellow Jedi, and they make their next move. So, next is where the Republic gunship goes after Dooku, and they're going to try to prevent the end of the Clone Wars. But unfortunately, Dooku manages to escape to his lair, and Padme gets shot down off the ship. And Anakin tries to make them stop, but Obi-Wan tells him to not let his personal feelings get in the way. But they decide to go on with their duty, and that's where we do get Anakin and Obi-Wan, where we get the lightsaber duel of this movie. I actually think this is easily one of my favorite lightsaber duels. Basically, where Jedi are going up against Dooku, and he's already shown to be powerful. He shocks Anakin with lightning. Obi-Wan tries to fight him with his lightsaber, but he gets cut down. He survives, of course, since we know plot armor, but he's still injured. Anakin tries to save him, but just like Luke, he gets his hand chopped off. But that's where we do get Yoda, probably to his best scene of the whole Star Wars saga, where he manages to fight Dooku after getting a ship ready, and he pulls out his lightsaber after the Force contest is proven wrong, where Dooku's like, "Our knowledge in the Force cannot help us, but by our skills of a lightsaber." And the two manage to have a duel, and it's super badass. But Yoda manages to save Anakin and Obi-Wan, who almost get crushed after Dooku tries to escape. He does escape, with Padme getting rescued by a clone trooper, and they manage to save Anakin and Obi-Wan, and Anakin gets a robot hand, and the Clone Wars has now started, where we see a whole bunch of clone troopers and all the senators watching it. We see Bail Organa, we see so many senators. I forgot to also mention, Sidious becomes the Supreme Chancellor because of Jar Jar, and now people don't like Jar Jar. But I'm actually, it's actually sad that what Ahmed Best went through, but he is lessened in this movie, of course. But once Palpatine becomes the Supreme Chancellor, that's a whole new low, because we know the Sith Lord is secretly running the Clone Wars, and that's what literally happens throughout the show. But our movie ends with Padme and Anakin marrying each other, with R2 and 3PO becoming best friends. But Attack of the Clones definitely was not my favorite of the Star Wars movies. Like I said, it's really just the romance for me that I have issues with, and some funny scenes, honestly, that would probably be viewed as a meme today. Definitely are. But there are definitely good things about this movie, as it sets up the Clone Wars really well. Our fellow actors are amazing as these characters. Hayden, Ewan, Natalie Frank Oz as Yoda, Christopher Lee as Count Dooku, Samuel Jackson as Mace Windu with the awesome purple lightsaber. There's just so much to love for each of the Star Wars movies. So I'll probably give this movie 7 out of 10. So, yeah, I don't mind watching Attack of the Clones, but I definitely prefer to watch Revenge of the Sith. So as you know, every year I review a different Star Wars movie, so hopefully next year, or if you viewers want me to, I'll definitely review Revenge of the Sith, which I'm super pumped to talk about next year, so be on the lookout. So anyway, thanks for watching, have a good Star Wars day, and may the Force be with you always.